Curt Cignetti and the Indiana Hoosiers are finally ranked inside the top 10 of this week's AP poll, and it is absolutely deserved.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, and it is the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. I'm your man, Jacob Goins. I appreciate you being here, making this your first listen or your first watch every single day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. Indiana ranked inside the top 10 of the latest AP poll, number 8 to be exact, and it's absolutely deserved. We'll talk about that today. Plus, our man Brian Smith, our Locked On recruiting expert, also Indiana grad, he wants to talk some Indiana football as the Hoosiers survive against the Iowa Hawkeyes. So we'll talk about that. Plus, a big commitment coming up this week on football to where Indiana could get one of the best players in the country. And then we'll flip over to basketball and, well, a little bit more of the same in terms of Indiana missing out on a big-time recruit. Tay Kinney does not choose the Hoosiers. But that's coming up later in today's show. But the Hoosiers are ranked inside the top 10 of the latest AP poll. Came out on Sunday, and Indiana is ranked 8th in the AP poll. And this is more so for the folks who don't think Indiana is a top 10 team. Because believe it or not, I have seen some people who are griping about the idea that the Hoosiers are ranked inside the top 10. Let's just say it like it is. I think they could have been put inside the top 10 after last week's win over Illinois at home in the way that they did it. But you move up 3 spots, you were ranked number 11, and after going on the road and beating what is, I think, a better Iowa team than I gave them credit for, you move up inside the top 10 and you're ranked at the 8th best team in the country. I want Indiana fans to just sit back for a moment, just sit back for just a second, and think about that statement. Indiana football is ranked as the 8th best team in college football. How awesome is that to think about? How cool is it to see that? And knowing that you're going into a bye week, you shouldn't drop outside the top 10, and you set up with now a top 10 matchup against the Oregon Ducks in 2 weeks. So we're also on a bye, but we'll talk about that in a moment. This is a historic spot for Indiana football. And tomorrow's show, we're going to talk about the historic start that Indiana's on, right? The fact that you're off to your best start 2 years in a row, and you haven't done this in the history of the program with where you are right now. I don't understand anybody that can argue against Indiana being in a top 10 position. Like, what about the Hoosiers' performances so far has said, yeah, I mean, you only beat Iowa by a score. I mean, yeah, it was 7 and then 5 with the safety, but I mean, it took a late touchdown to do it, right? I mean, it took a turnover and a late touchdown, and I mean, Iowa's just not that good. Come on. We're not going to give credit for a nice win. I said on Saturday it wasn't a pretty win. I said it was ugly. I said it was disgusting, and it was. But a win is a win. And on the road in the Big Ten, credit needs to be given where it's due. And Indiana deserves a top 10 credit and a top 10 ranking for what you did against Iowa. You also should still be getting credit for what you did against Illinois, especially since they found a way to beat USC this weekend. Illinois now back inside the top 25, or I guess they were never out of the top 25, but they only moved up 1 to the 22nd spot in the country. And I don't know if I firmly agree with that either. But you now have a top 25 win on your resume and a win in one of the hardest places to play in college football. I just think that people who are claiming Curt Cignetti and the Hoosiers don't belong are just refusing to acknowledge that Indiana's good at football. And I'm going to leave it at that and say that the Hoosiers have absolutely deserved this. Now, there are some things in this AP poll that I pretty much agree with, and some that I absolutely do not. But guess what? That's the AP poll, and they do whatever they want to. Half of them don't watch the games. Half of them try to make up for what they did or didn't do a week ago, and they're really not true reflections top to bottom of the best teams in college football. But you know what? We give anybody a vote nowadays, and we let them have a say, and we're going to just rely on it until we get the college football playoff rankings. It is what it is. Do I think Ohio State's the best team in the country? Yeah, I do. I do. I think Ohio State is the best team in college football. And for what they did against Washington this weekend, they deserve it. Oregon should be ranked number 2, and they are, after going on the road, couple of overtimes to do it, but beating Penn State and Happy Valley. Dante Moore sold me, man. And Dan Lanning might just be the best head coach in all of college football. Miami drops a spot after Oregon jumps them. That's fine. Ole Miss is the 4th-ranked team in the country. It seems high. It does. It seems high, but they had a good win over LSU, so I guess you got to give it to them. It just seems like it's a little much for me, and I think they'll get humbled because that's just what Lane Kiffin does. Oklahoma at 5th. Right? So 2 Big Ten teams out the top. You got an ACC team squeezed in there, and then 3 SEC teams back to back to back. Ole Miss, Oklahoma, and Texas A&M. Penn State stays as a top 10 team at 7th, as they should. Indiana's at 8. Texas is at 9 for whatever reason. They still haven't done anything. Alabama makes a big jump after their win over Georgia, and that is absolutely necessary. That's absolutely correct. Looking through some other rankings in here for the Big Ten, it's top heavy, man. Our conference is top heavy because, again, with Ohio State at 1, Oregon 2, now Indiana at 8, you're looking down this list, and it doesn't happen until you get to Michigan at 20th, Illinois at 22nd, and some teams who are on the outside looking in USC, Maryland, and a couple of others. This conference is really good, the Big Ten is, but we're going to have to find some folks who can continue to bring up the rear, or at least bring up the middle part of the conference, right? You want USC to keep winning. You want Illinois to keep winning. You want Michigan to keep winning too. We need the Big Ten to have as many teams near the top as possible, and especially for Indiana, right? When you start looking at the remaining schedule for us, Maryland is starting to get a little love and show some life. Right, are the Terrapins, who are 4-0 on a bye week this week. They host Washington next week, so don't look past Maryland just yet. But the fact that Indiana now, it's confirmed, you should have 2 top 10 teams on your remaining schedule when you go to Oregon and to Penn State. At least the Oregon matchup will be a top 10 game. Not exactly sure what Penn State will be, but for all the haters out there, Indiana is a top 10 football team, and whether you like it or not, you're just going to have to accept it, at least for the next couple of weeks. All right, coming up here on Locked On Hoosiers, our man Brian Smith, our Locked On recruiting expert, host of the Portal podcast. He joins us coming up next to talk some recruiting, talk about Indiana's win over Iowa, and where the Hoosiers go from here. Our man Brian Smith joins us right after this. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by 5-Hour Energy. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5-Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. What I love most is how portable that they are. Big taste in a tiny shot. You can take it anywhere and get a boost when you need it. I have them in my desk drawer in my office. I always keep them in my backpack, especially when I'm calling games for high school football and basketball and things like that. And honestly, even doing some of these shows sometimes, I need a little extra boost, especially late at night or early in the morning, doing whatever I got to do to bring you guys content. 5-Hour Energy helps me get through the day. Enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5-Hour Energy shots. Get the favorites you love, or be bold and try something new in store and online at www.5hourenergy.com, or find them on Amazon today. Welcome in. It is a Locked On crossover between Hoosiers and the Portal podcast. I'm Jacob Goins, host of Locked On Hoosiers. He is Brian Smith, host of the Portal podcast, also our Locked On recruiting expert. And of course, he's an Indiana grad as well. We appreciate him and you for being with us on this episode. It's brought to you today by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. Well, Brian, it wasn't pretty, but Indiana takes down Iowa over the weekend, 20-15. We're going to cover the Big Ten as a whole because the Big Ten race is wide open on the teams who could win the conference, plus the ones that can make the college football playoff. Also, how Indiana can just build on recruiting momentum with some of the biggest players in the country. But the Hoosiers get it done against Iowa, and they used a bunch of their portal players to do so.
Yeah, it's amazing how you didn't just hit last year with some of the kids coming over from where you were before. Signetti brought 13 of those kids. I was like, let's see if he can do it again. And he did. Name a program that evaluates the portal any better than the Hoosiers. 2 years in a row is hard because it's easier to recruit high school kids, but he wanted to win right away. Props to his staff. And secondarily, they're not just good. It's weird how, let's just use Mendoza as an example. It looks like he's been playing with Surratt and Coop for 5 years.
Yeah.
They're in sync. Like that first drive, they get the turnover, boom, 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 in the end zone. I'm like, they have got the death knell for any team that screws up. They want to hammer them. And while Iowa played very valiantly and Indiana didn't play up to their standard, at the end, what happened? They had that opportunity and that cohesion. The coaching took over there too. Right play calls. And by the way, terrible call on the cover zero blitz by Iowa there at the end. But
yeah,
as an Indiana grad, I said it when I watched them. I'm like, this is not a good idea. And he scored. You guys run cover two. It's what you do. You're Iowa. And they cover zero blitz bad. But put it on the money. Mendoza could not have thrown that pass to Surratt any better. And again, like we just talked about it before the show, Jacob, he's sixth in the Heisman odds. Fernando Mendoza, in my opinion, should be top three, but that's just me. But it is what it is. I think if they go 10-2 or better, he will be in New York City. Who wins it at this point is really random. Obviously, Mateer got hurt with his hand. That, unfortunately for him, there are a lot of guys in this. I don't know who's going to win it, but Mendoza has got to be one of those guys.
Well, going into the Iowa game, Fernando Mendoza was the betting odds favorite with FanDuel to win the Heisman Trophy. That has since shifted around a little bit. Yes, because of Fernando Mendoza's lackluster performance, right? Even though, as you mentioned, he delivered a game-winning touchdown pass. He did have his first interception on the year, but he bounced back and delivered a game-winning touchdown pass. But I think more so it's because of some of the guys around him in other programs that elevated their performance this past weekend. Dante Moore being a big example, being the young freshman. He's now the betting odds favorite over at FanDuel. But I'm with you. I just think Fernando Mendoza looks so comfortable in this offense. And that's why I was excited when he came in from Cal to replace Curtis Rourke from last year, because they're very similar. They're both talented. They make the right decision, and they deliver a football on time and on target. And it's hard for me to find bigger and more impactful transfer portal additions than Fernando Mendoza. How about Roman Hemby, right? The Maryland running back transfer, who looks really, really good in my opinion. I think he needs the football a lot more times than they're giving it to him. But Indiana just finds dudes in the portal that fit their system. They weren't the most highlighted guys in the portal, Brian. They weren't the 5-star transfer portal players begging for millions of dollars. Curt Cignetti and his guys said, look, let's go get dudes that fit our system, that fit our program, and fit our values, and we'll make it work from there.
That's exactly what they did. And culture wins, man. Look at the teams that made the playoffs last year. Except for the wild card, like Boise State sort of decides that's the G6. But Arizona State was like the one just full of transfer team that took kids from everywhere, and hats off to them last year. But they had Scatterboo. That he's killing the NFL too. So
yeah,
he's an animal. Steele, what did he go with? 4th round? Terrible job by the NFL draft people.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is you got to have fit. And Mendoza is a better, and I'm not picking on Rourke, but between him and Rourke, like, it ain't close. It's Mendoza. He's got better arm. He's got a little more mobility than what I remember too. He's done a good enough job of going to get you 4 to 6 yards that it still helps move the sticks.
Sometimes too much. Sometimes too much. He took a pretty nasty shot on Saturday.
I think when you first see how fast they are running in warm-ups, it's one thing, but seeing them come at you is something that now Mendoza knows for the wrong reasons. That wasn't a shot. That was a helicopter that ran into him, okay? Like, he just got obliterated. It's like a crash landing. He's lucky he got up from that one.
Yeah.
But he has made plays, and even after that, he was fine. He has made plays when they had to have it. That's the kind of guy that ends up in the Heisman race. But to the overall theme here, they're one of a very select few teams that can make a run in the playoffs that aren't just very strong high school. Like Ohio State cherry picks the portal. Michigan cherry picks the portal. Texas does too. Those programs, it's just easier to recruit. Indiana's got a very small room for error situation with the portal, and they're hitting it. I mean, I cover Florida State too. I've seen what it looks like when you miss on the portal, up close and personal. It's called 2 and 10. I don't advise it for anybody covering a football team.
Indiana knows nothing about 2 and 10. Brian, the Hoosiers have never had bad losing football seasons. I don't know what you're talking about.
Never mind. I'm not going to bring that conversation up because I grew up in the state of Indiana. But the Hoosiers, they've just got the chemistry that you can't explain with the portal, and it's really cool to watch. I'm not saying that because I'm an Indiana grad. I'm saying that because very few teams do it. And some of them, like, it's just like it's a train that's headed the wrong way. And to be honest with you, you can usually tell pretty quick. And Indiana's just got it, man. Like, I think this team's going to finish in the top 4 of the Big Ten. And before this season, I said 7-5, 8-4, somewhere in there, because now they're the hunted and all that. They don't care. They're out to stomp people. Ask Illinois, who, by the way, just turned around and beat USC. That makes Indiana look a lot better. That
helps. It does. Yes, it does.
So, like, Indiana's in a pretty good spot right now.
Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by Quo. One of the tools that help make a huge difference for business owners is Quo, formerly known as Open Phone. It's the same great business phone system you've heard me talk about before, just with a new name. And here's why it matters. Every missed call is money left on the table. When every customer conversation counts, you need a phone system that keeps you connected 24/7. Quo is the #1 business phone system that streamlines customer communications. It works right through an app on your phone or on your computer. So no more carrying 2 phones or relying on a landline. I love how Quo, formerly known as Open Phone, lets your team share one number and collaborate on calls and text like a shared inbox. So no customer data or no customer at all gets left hanging. See why over 90,000 businesses, that's right, 90,000 businesses trust Quo, formerly known as Open Phone. Get started for free and get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockedoncollege. That's QUO.com/lockedoncollege. And if you've got existing numbers with another service, don't worry. Quo will port them over at no extra charge. Quo, no missed calls, which means no missed customers. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Look, yesterday, NFL Sunday, I can't lie, I took advantage. Baker Mayfield to Bucky Irving, that's my duo in the NFL. I have him on my fantasy team. I also sprinkled a little cash on him as well. And I can't lie, I cashed in knowing that the Carolina Panthers couldn't do it 2 weeks in a row. They may have blown out the Falcons 2 weeks ago, but they got blown out by New England yesterday, and your boy was able to take advantage of that. So you can do that too using FanDuel right now. And so if you're ready for it, visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. All right, final segment here on Locked On Hoosiers. Thank you again so much for being here, truly making this your go-to spot for all things Indiana athletics. And shout out to our guy, Brian Smith of Locked On the Portal. Always talking transfer portal, NIL, recruiting things on his show. So be sure you go and check that out. And I believe Brian's going to be joining us for some basketball shows coming up really, really soon, as we are just over 5 weeks out from the start of Indiana basketball. And we're also on the verge of flipping into the month of October, which is an important month. I told you the end of September and October were going to be crucial for Darren DeVries and the Indiana basketball program on the recruiting side of things. And I'm sure most of you saw what happened yesterday in high school recruiting. Joe Tipton breaking the news that 15th ranked recruit Tay Kinney, or Tay Kinney as he goes by, he committed to the Kansas Jayhawks. This was a kid that Indiana was in on from start to finish, right? This was a guy that Indiana and Darren DeVries wanted for their program, one of the best point guards in the country, one of the best guards in the country, and frankly, just one of the best players in the class of 2026. And it's so wild with his recruitment because at 6'3", the point guard chooses Kansas, But they weren't the ones who really started all of this. If you remember, Louisville was always the team in my heart that I felt had the best position with him, at least from the beginning. And they just slowly lost their lead, right? Kind of like the Europeans at the Ryder Cup. They just kind of lost their lead, but they couldn't pull it off at the end. It was Bill Self in Kansas who came in and pulled off. I'd call it an upset. I would. I'd call it an upset. If you remember, Tay Kinney had Kentucky, Louisville, Kansas, Oregon, Arkansas, and your Indiana Hoosiers in his top 6. And he does pick Bill Self and the Kansas Jayhawks. And look, this is another miss for Darren DeVries in Indiana. Plain and simple. It's another miss that you wanted and you did not get, who now goes to another big-time program. Thankfully, it's not in the Big Ten, but you're still losing out on these kids that you've worked so hard to go after and so hard to land. You just haven't been able to pull one off yet. And I think we had all accepted. There's a reason we haven't talked about him recently. I told you that Indiana probably wasn't in this one anymore. But it still hurts to see. It still doesn't make it any more fun to watch him pick somewhere else. And, you know, some fans may say, well, maybe Indiana was right there. Maybe the Hoosiers had a better standing with Tay Kinney than we thought. No, unfortunately not. Once it got down to those final 4 or 6, and we told you that Indiana was kind of out of it, Indiana was kind of out of it, okay? He was asked by Joe Tipton. He says, if not for Kansas, who would have been the pick for you? And Tay Kinney responded, it would probably be Arkansas or Louisville. So there you go. Either would have been Pat Kelsey in Louisville, who, again, we thought it was the entire time up till recently, or John Calipari in Arkansas. And so, regardless, Indiana misses out here, and now you got to move on. You've lost out on several big kids, and now you got to move on. Anthony Brown you missed out on, Tay Kinney you missed out on, and you're still working for several big-time players, okay? You've still got Ethan Taylor, the number 2 center who was just on campus, who absolutely loved his visit to Bloomington. His parents loved the visit to Bloomington. Indiana loved his visit to Bloomington. Everything seemed to have gone really well here for the number 2 center in the class of 2026. And I'm not just saying this, okay? Hopefully you're picking up on the idea that I'm not going to tell you something if I don't know it or I don't believe it. I believe that Indiana is right there in the top 2 or 3 to land the second-ranked center in the country, Ethan Taylor. I think you have every opportunity to make it happen. But you're also in it for Anthony Thompson, who again is ranked 7th or 8th, depending on where you look. He's a top 10 player in the class of 2026. I think Indiana is probably in the best spot with him of all the players that we've been talking about, and I'm going to tell you about here as we go. So keep an eye on Anthony Thompson, who is going to be deciding in the month of October. Latrell Almond, right, top 30, 40 player, depending on where you look. He's another forward. I think Indiana's in a good spot with him as well. Going to have to make something happen, but I think you can do it, okay? Erfan Diani, the number 1 center in the class of 2026. There's also been some Kansas ties there, and I'm sure some of you probably saw the comments from Joe Tipton, or I guess the reports from Joe Tipton, the comments from Tay Kinney, who said he's already recruiting somebody big to come with him to Kansas. The assumption is that that's Erfan Diani, who the Jayhawks have been after for quite some time. They've been after Ethan Taylor too, but they're not going to land both, not in today's era. A, I don't think they can afford it, which is crazy to say for Kansas, but it's just the truth. And B, 2 of the nation's best centers don't typically go to the same place for obvious reasons. So, Erfan Diani is still in the mix for Indiana, but maybe don't get your hopes up on that one. And then Mika Marinin. Remember, we talked about him as being one of the best athletes in the world, and I still think that's the case. I still believe that's the case. Sure, you saw this news. Decided to play another year overseas. He's not going to come back and play in Arizona. He's not going to play high school ball. He's going to stay and play overseas, which for his play style, I think is probably smart, to be quite honest with you. And so there's some debate on whether he comes back at all, whether he plays college ball, whether he just tries to test the draft waters whenever he's eligible, right, without finishing up high school, which kind of complicates it a little bit. But I do believe that Mika Miranin still is going to play a year or two of college basketball, and I think Indiana is in the spot to do so. But you're talking a couple of years down the road here. So the ones you need to keep an eye out on if you're looking for Indiana to make a move and land somebody, I think Ethan Taylor, I think Latrell Almond, and I think Anthony Thompson. I think those are the three names that you now need to put all your focus on if you're an Indiana fan, just from a content consumption perspective. But if you are Darren DeVries and this staff, those are the ones you feel the best on. And I think it comes down to system. I think it comes down to NIL. And I think it comes down to feel and just personal choice for those three players. But I still feel confident, and this is still a feeling, so do not hold me to this. I don't have the power to convince them to do it. I still feel that the Hoosiers are not going to be left out to dry when it's all said and done. I don't think that Indiana comes up short or comes up empty at all. I think the Hoosiers still at least get one, and I feel pretty good about getting two. I've said that from the beginning with Darren DeVries in the class of 2026, that I guaranteed you get somebody, and I still feel good about you possibly getting two here as well. It would be a shock to me. I'll end and give you this. It would be a surprise and a shock to me if Indiana comes up completely empty here. I know that you still have Prince Alexander Moody. I know that. I'm talking about with these kids who were top 40, top 30, top 20, top 10 in the class. It would be a major shock to me and those in the recruiting world if Indiana were to just completely swing and miss on all of them. I've told you the end of September and the month of October are crucial. And Indiana basketball is hitting that big point now. You want to land some of these commits and get into the season and have an opportunity to prove it on the hardwood. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers. Again, thank you so much for being here. Greatly appreciate you making this your first listen or your first watch every single day. Make sure if you are watching on YouTube to drop your thoughts down in the YouTube comments. Subscribe to the channel as well. And like this video too. That helps it get out there and helps other people find it. Helps us grow as a channel. And if you're on audio, make sure you follow us there. Turn on those notifications so you never miss a new episode of Locked On Hoosiers, okay? We are back tomorrow, Hoosier fans, for another episode. So until then, stay safe, and I'll talk to you later.